Which should you buy, Eagle Rare or Michter's US-1 Bourbon? Let's find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So this is one of my favorite series on the channel, What Should You Buy? We basically just pit two bourbons against each other head to head each time we do this series and answer the question, if you only could buy one of these, which one should you go after? I think it's particularly helpful in the current bourbon and whiskey market where there's just so many choices to really take a deep dive, a little specific look at two options and just say which one's actually better or which one's a better value. So we'll continue that series today. I think this matchup in particular is pretty interesting for a couple of reasons. So first, we've got Eagle Rare. This is a 90 proof bourbon, 10 years old, from the most sought after distillery in the world, Buffalo Trace. The availability on this is pretty limited. In some places, pretty much impossible to find. In other places, more regular on the shelves. And the price, when you see it for MSRP, is right around $40. But oftentimes you'll see it marked up to $65, $75, maybe even over $100 if you're in sort of the wrong market. Still, it is a lot of people's sort of quintessential easy sipper, daily sipper kind of option. Then on the flip side, you have Michter's US-1 Bourbon. So this is 91.4 proof, relatively close to the Eagle Rare. It is undisclosed how old it is, but given the quality of Michter's products across the board, I'm willing to bet this is 6+ years old, maybe closer to that, 10. In some cases, some of that could be blended in. Who knows? It's right around $40 to $45 in terms of price point, and then availability, you can get this pretty much anywhere. Most liquor stores across America are gonna have Michter's US-1 Bourbon. So in terms of competing with Eagle Rare, that might be the central question today. Is Eagle Rare that much better in that you should hunt it down, maybe even pay closer to $65 instead of MSRP to grab a bottle of this? Or is this staple option that's always available around $40 to $45 actually just as good, maybe even better when we're talking about Michter's US-1? All right, so let's dive in. What we do is we just nose both, taste both, evaluate both whiskeys, and I'll let you know what I'm thinking in terms of value, availability, the whole matrix that comes together to make good buying decisions in bourbon. Okay, so Eagle Rare on the nose. Oh, it does smell really good. Grapes and cherries and oak. You can tell it's got age, almost no ethanol, strong vanilla. That's where so much of the age I think comes from, is that vanilla. There's a little bit of barrel influence, but tons of vanilla. Yeah, it's like cherry juice and a grape. Big grape note that I get on Eagle Rare, tend to get that on just Buffalo Trace bourbon as well. But they're both giving off that profile in spades. So this one is cherry, grape, vanilla, oak, and not too much beyond that, to be honest with you. It is not the most complex experience, but you can anticipate just a flavorful, smooth sip. All right, then on the nose here for the Michter's US-1 Bourbon. Ooh, also pretty dang good. Much more brown sugar, like a dry, simmering cinnamon and brown sugar kick to this. Maybe a slight more presence of grain, but barrel and oak too. It's less of the vanilla tannins of the oak that you get kind of on the Eagle Rare, and it's more of the barrel char, brown sugar, caramel kind of experience. A little bit of like a black pepper or something as well. But again, not the most complex, doesn't necessarily have to be at its price point, but it's very brown sugary, and I think it actually kind of sits not too far off from the Eagle Rare, if not on the same level on the nose, which is quite the achievement. I will say, the Michter's US-1, I have had kind of an up and down journey with this bottle in particular. As I've had it longer and it's opened up and I've come back to it multiple times, I've been more and more impressed each time. So keep that in mind as we go. All right, let's go to Eagle Rare on the palate. Cheers. Yeah, it's fruity, it's light, some bright notes like the cherry and the grape, maybe even like an apple on the nose for me, sorry, on the palate. But then as the sip kind of unfolds, there's definitely more of that oak and vanilla experience that kind of wraps around your cheeks a little bit. It's very good. Doesn't have the longest finish in the world. We'll kind of evaluate that on our second sip more, but just noting that is a little bit more of a fleeting experience, but it's flavorful, it's sweet, and there's no off-putting notes. It's got some good age to it as well. All right, let's move over to the Michter's US-1 bourbon on the palate. Cheers. Okay, so one thing I will note is that both of these bottles are very honest. And what I mean by that is what they show you on the nose comes through pretty strong on the palate. So for me on the Michter's, it's that dry brown sugar, cinnamon spice kind of thing going on. Oak, a little bit of like caramel, so just something a little gooier and sugary, but it is a little bit drier. Maybe a touch of like leather kind of because of that. You could argue there's just a slight nuttiness here too. Not quite peanut, but maybe more like a walnut, something along those lines. But I think the strongest feature, and I do tend to get this on some, I have a Michter's 10 bourbon, and it's a little bit similar to this, obviously a different profile, but it shares the same DNA with that drier, hefty oak and brown sugar. Okay, so that's a first run through. Let me go back in reverse order. We'll do our second sip and our final comparison here, and then I'll let you know what I'm thinking. Okay, so going back into the Michter's, and I do like to go, reverse order from one back to the other, just because that can always mess with your palate a little bit. So cheers. Okay, very similar second sip. Getting that oak, brown sugar, cinnamon, a little bit of that nut. It's a little drying. It is a little, I wouldn't say thin, but the lower proof definitely comes through in the sense that I wish there was a little more roundedness to it. I'm looking for a little bit more of a sweet vanilla or caramel to really shine through, and it isn't really. I think if it had one or two more layers like that, it would be phenomenal for the price. It's very good for the price as it stands, but I think there's a little bit holding it back. In terms of the finish, that cinnamon spice and the oak kind of stick around for me for a longer time than maybe I first felt on the Eagle Rare, but we'll go back and we'll see. So I'd call it a low end of medium finish on this bottle. Okay, let's go back to the Eagle Rare. Our final sip here on this one. We'll evaluate the full experience and then I'll give you my final decision. Okay, nice. So that one took me on a little bit of a ride. So it started out sweeter with that grapey note. Then a little bit of spice and barrel influence came through on the middle of the sip, giving it some heft. And then it faded into this vanilla cherry sweetness for me. Maybe even like a slight bubblegum kind of note going on here. It's very good. You can feel the age. Similar to the Michter's, I just wish there was one or two more layers to really take it to the next level. I think the finish here is a little bit shorter than the Michter's as well, probably because it has a little bit less spice. But overall, as I think this through, what is my final recommendation? What should you buy? I think we're gonna have to take this one in a couple different directions. Based on strictly MSRP, if this bottle is sitting in front of you for $37 to $40 Eagle Rare versus the $40 to $45 for the Michter's US-1, I would say buy the Eagle Rare. You definitely get a little bit more of the depth and age, maybe a little bit more of a refined sip versus the Michter's US-1. It's a slight edge though. Now, if Eagle Rare is $55 plus, I'm 100% saying go with the Michter's US-1 at the $40 to $45 mark. This bottle is actually going pretty close to toe-to-toe with Eagle Rare today. It's quite good for the price when you think about it. I do think Eagle Rare, one of the reasons it gets the hype it gets is just it comes from Buffalo Trace, and that whole train generates so much hype. But honestly, if you just pick up a Michter's US-1 bourbon for $42 or whatever it is, you're gonna enjoy that experience at a similar level to Eagle Rare. So, I know that's a little bit of a cheat, but basically, at MSRP, I think the Eagle Rare is the stronger option. When you factor in the availability, the difficulty of hunting down Eagle Rare, the spottiness, versus the always available and relatively affordable Michter's, I honestly might lean toward the Michter's as just the stronger overall option. If you want something that you know you can stock your collection with that's at this proof point, Michter's US-1 fits the bill. All right, that's gonna do it, everybody. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this battle, and if you've ever compared these two bourbons together, what did you think? What's your sort of preference? Or maybe if you haven't done it already, it's a good excuse to do it and see what your results are. While you're at it, hit the like button on this video. That's what gets it out to the most people. And then if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the Bourbon Hutch, joining us for the rest of 2025 and beyond. We are getting into that range where 5,000 subscribers doesn't seem quite so far away. So maybe we make that our goal by the end of 2025. 5,000 subscribers, nice round number. Help us get there. All right, till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey. Not sure which one of these to grab. I usually grab the winner, so we'll just go with Eagle Rare, and cheers.